off, let's start our first panel discussion, transformation of IP, patent, trademark, and copyright. Major shift to enhance GCC's and Asian IP industry. To discuss this, I would like to call upon stage Ahmad Eldakak, Principal Ahmad Eldakak, Intellectual Property. Munir Suboh, Partner, Head of Intellectual Property, BSA Ahmad bin Hezeem and Associate LLP.
Hey everyone. I guess today we are talking about the transformation of IP in the GCC. Everybody knows that in the recent years, the GCC has been trying to shift from depending on oil revenues and try to go to knowledge-based technology and knowledge-based economy. And to do that, you have to attract investments and you have to also attract brains. So one of the things to attract investments is really to work and enhance innovation and IP in the GCC. And we don't know how diverse is the audience, and so we decided that we will give you a brief introduction to IP. What is it, IP? Why it's significant really to work on IP in the region to enhance economy. Want to tell us something about it?
Thank you, Amr. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Munir Suboh, and by way of background, I'm a partner and head of intellectual property at a regional law firm based in the IFC called BSA. I've been in the UAE since 2007, been practicing in IP and related areas in technology and trademark and copyrights with focus in those areas in both contentious and non-contentious matters. I know that we are like 10 minutes behind our schedule, and I think we have our third panelist who unfortunately has to call it off yesterday because he was called in sick. So I think we are good in time. I want to thank you again for joining this and joining our panel today. Both me and Amr coming from the same industry in practice, private practice in IP. And before entering to this session, we felt that it will be a good idea if we just have it as an open discussion. So at any point where you feel that you want to give any interaction or you want to give any suggestions or statements or even a question, feel free to raise your hand or even keep it at the end because we're going to have 10 minutes for open questions. We don't have any moderators, so we will be shifting some of the topics and the discussions and the point that we will cover today. Just before we get into the content of this one, how many of you deal with intellectual property rights on their routine day-to-day works and their day-to-day duties? If there is anyone is doing IP as, okay. So we have almost 1/3 of the audiences are in the IP, while probably the others, intellectual property still as a dark topic or a dark area. So just for the sake of getting everyone on the same page, when we deal with the intellectual property, we deal with the intangible assets, things that we know that in each company, in each corporate, the assets are either tangible assets or intangible assets. Intangible assets, things that has to do with the value that you accumulated from innovation, from new mental works, intellectual works, but it has to do with the goodwill when we deal about trademarks. And the most common area of intellectual property, or when you hear the term IP, we need to be aware that there are trademarks, copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. These are the most common aspects of IP rights, and each one of them, it entails different rights and obligations on the owners of those assets. I personally will be telling you more about the transformations of the protection of the trademarks and copyrights, while Amr, maybe he can elaborate more on the patents and the inventions, and he can give more of his insights on what we have seen in the last maybe 10, 15 years and what we expect in the future. So if you would like to start with the history, how the patents started here and how it transformed, that I think would be a good idea, Amr.
So basically, it's really a big topic to talk about transformation in the region here. As I was saying, and also reflecting on what Munir was talking about, it's really important to work on your IP and protect it. So this will come with many benefits to the economy. You have a competitive edge over competitors. You protect your intellectual property that can give you an edge to have licensing with others, that can give you the edge for collaboration, that also can prevent infringers from using your technology in the market where you are. So there are different benefits for this. Now about the transformation in the region, I believe we can tackle different topics here. The first one, which is really important from my perspective, is the legislative reforms, the IB laws. In 2021, if you guys are living here in the UAE, the UAE really got a massive reform of the laws. 50 different laws have been issued. We are really going to emphasize on the IP laws. There is the patent law, and there is also trademark and copyright law. So briefly, I would love to tell you what really has changed to answer Munir's question about history. The new law is actually the most important thing from the patent perspective. They give you novel grace period. Novel grace period or novelty grace period means that before, it was really a problem for academics and for inventors that once you give a seminar anywhere or write an article or any public domain has been having your invention, you really can't file a patent application and cannot protect it in the Middle East. Now they give you 12 months that your invention can be in the public domain, which is huge for academics, that they can go to conferences, they can publish articles and manuscripts, and yet they can have a patent application filed. So that drives more of interest for protecting patents. Another thing is publication. It used to be that only you will know about a patent filed or an invention filed once it's granted a patent certificate. Not anymore. The new law is giving that the patent application has to be published 18 months from the date of filing, which means that for freedom to operate, if a new company coming to the market and you want to really know if you can have the freedom to operate in this market or not, you can search and know about patent applications even before getting granted. Another important thing also is accelerated examination. 3-4 years back, there was actually a big backlog at the patent office that if you filed, your application will not be examined for 6 or 5 years. Now they're cutting down that period of examination time or waiting time only to 3 years. And theoretically, you can pay a fee and get ahead of the line. In Saudi Arabia, actually, they have what's called PPPH, which is Patent Prosecution Highway. Once you got granted somewhere in the biggest 5 patent offices, you can claim that, and they right away grant your application acceptance or allowance. So all these changes in the law really made a big difference for patents and inventors, and also make investors have more trust that the patent system in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and the GCC in general is aligning with the international standards. It's not anymore that we are away and we're doing things our own way. We have harmonization with the international community, and that gives faith in the patent system. And I believe there are different trademark changes also.
I mean, thank you, Amr. The transformation that Amr mentioned is like, it moved from a dysfunctional office where they just receive application and they do nothing about it. It just stays there. And this is really crucial for patents because the duration of the patent protection is 20 years from filing date. So if you spend 7 or 8 years in examination and you don't get any granting, that will really limit your protection and your ability to claim a registered patent rights to a shorter period. And that was a very painful process for industries and companies that invest a lot in protecting their patent. And I see that has substantially changed. You start to see the offices are more functional and they get a lot of more technology, people with a know-how on how to deal with the patent prosecutions. And we reach to a point where the acceleration is something we start to see it, and we expect more and more to come. Now, the new laws that just Amr mentioned, they're just one of the steps to take us to the right direction, where we reach to a point where we're going to have a great patent prosecution system. And similarly to that, we have seen some good progress in the trademark and copyright system as well. So as we said, like these are the main aspects or rights of intellectual property that require protection, that require some focus from all the stakeholders involved in the process, whether it's a governmental authorities or a private sector or even individuals who create those rights. All of them together, they need to accelerate their protection process and formalities. And this is something we've seen it in the last few years. And if we look at the trademark protection, for instance, it used to be very manual. Applications used to be submitted in a paperwork, and that may take up to 12 months before it gets the examination decision. And after the examination decision, they have to go through publication to allow third party for opposition. If the opposition is filed, then maybe the trademark will not be subject to a decision before 3 or 4 years. What we start to see in the last maybe 7 or 8 years, that we start to see a digitalized process. So application no longer need the paperwork. You apply directly to the Ministry of Economy in the UAE. You get an examination decision within a few months period. At the best peak time, it used to be in the same month where you get an examination decision. Nowadays, maybe it will require more time than that. Hopefully, in the coming year, we will start to see a better turnaround of the applications. And so the registration process itself and the protection process, if it's get empowered with technology and it get accelerated, that will give a more comfort for all the investor or all the stakeholders who have an interest in protecting their IP rights to have the best out of the system. And the transformation we've seen it in allowing the technology, whether locally or regionally, is a precedent. It has never been like that before. We start to see most of the IP offices or trademark offices in the region, they have adopted with the new technology or the new digital tools to allow them to receive application, do the examination, communicate with the applicant or their agents until the registration is granted. The registration is very important for those who don't really deal with the IP rights. Registration in IP is one of the key tools to prove the ownership on the intangible assets. So if you have a brand and you have been using it for a while, and unless you have the registration for that brand, you will not have the ownership against third party. So you cannot go and enforce it, you cannot utilize it, you cannot assign it, you cannot license it. Same thing with patent, of course. Maybe copyright has an exception. Copyrights is something that require a minimum originality. So all the international community and all the legislators, they agreed on a compromise where copyright can be protected from the time of fixation. It does not require registration. So registration is a complementary thing. If you do it, that's perfect. If you don't do it, you still can emphasize your copyrights. And that's why the copyright is more of an issue whether to prove when you exactly authored the original work when there is a disputes happen. So the transformation back to that point in the trademark and copyrights has gone through a different milestone. In the beginning of this millennium in 2002, we started to see the first set of regulations that were enacted in the UAE. You know, after the international treaties such as TRIPS and WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, they put a lot of efforts to improve the legislations in all the countries. We've seen the first laws enacted in 2002. And then later in 2021, when the reform of the economic regulations happened in the UAE,